It's not just row crop farmers dealing with challenges and low prices. In California, from nuts to fruits, prices are low and financial stress is weighing heavily on farmers. For grape growers, the situation is a bit unique. Declining demand for wine and an increase in imported wine means there's a glut of grapes this year. And it's so bad, there's a surge in the amount of unharvested grapes that still don't have a home. Now there are fears it could ultimately force more true family farmers out of business. The fifth generation to farm in her family.
I think it's incredibly rare.
Jennifer Thompson is one of the few family farmers still left in Napa Valley.
When you truly meet a family grower who is hands-on and drives their own tractor and is responsible for selling their own fruit and is responsible for paying the taxes on the land, and there's no middleman involved, that's a rarity in 2024.
Thompson bought this land from her uncle and grandfather, taking over in 2012. And this year, it's a healthy crop.
The crop, at least at our ranches, looks mildew-free, looks like it's sized up nicely.
Battling different weather each year, she says this year there actually haven't been too many speed bumps in the road. Yet these vines aren't as full as they'd normally be.
I made some key decisions during pruning to reduce the crop load as a benefit or in conjunction with this being a sluggish grape selling market.
In December of last year, Thompson got some gut-wrenching news.
But ultimately, all of our contracts were canceled on December 31st, 2023.
All of them?
All of them with the exception of one.
Thompson's vineyards produce just under 300 tons of grapes each year. And for the first time in more than a decade, 2/3 of it is without a home.
I have found limited and very small homes. And by that, I mean, am I able to sell 2 to 8 tons here or there? Yes. But our parcels produce hundreds of tons worth of grapes.
Walking these vineyards and staring at young, healthy vines loaded with unsold grapes is a flashback to what area vineyards saw 11 to 12 years ago.
During sort of the dot-com era and the financial bust of 2008 and 2009, this sort of same or similar pattern occurred in the marketplace where wineries canceled all contracts across the board for many growers, or even those growers who had contracts were told, do not deliver those grapes to our winery.
4% of California's wine production happens here in Napa Valley, but its value is higher. And about 60 miles east, grape growers in Lodi, California are faced with the same dilemma.
Our community is multi-generational farming families that, their families have been farming grapes for over 100 years. And so their whole identity is wrapped up in growing grapes. And so it's really hitting some of our people hard.
20% of California's total wine production comes from Lodi, home to 100,000 acres of grapes. Executive Director of the Lodi Wine Grape Commission, Stuart Spencer, says the issue is both too much supply and dwindling demand.
We were fortunate in our industry and in the United States to have about 30 years of positive growth, year after year growth. And, one of the challenges with growth is it tends to hide the problems and challenges.
He says the U.S. wine market started to see demand flatten in 2018 as the baby boomer generation grew older.
And then we went into the pandemic, and the pandemic really distorted sales and shipments. And we are still dealing with the hangover of the distortions from the pandemic.
As consumers have bought more wine, beer, and spirits during the pandemic, they also beefed up their inventories. But now they're cutting back. And with inflation and other concerns in the economy, consumers are simply drinking less wine as well.
It's pushed, the inventory back upstream, basically to the wineries, who then turn around and cut grape purchases to the growers.
Spencer says there's also been an anti-alcohol sentiment in the news over the past year.
One of the problems we see there is, they're not differentiating between, abuse and healthy use. And you had the World Health Organization come out with saying no level of alcohol is safe. And so a lot of these things are kind of in a backdrop that's really putting pressure on wine.
With the decline in demand, Spencer says it came to a head during last year's harvest.
A lot of our growers in the Lodi area operate on what are called long-term contracts. And, many of the large wine companies were using every kind of loophole in the contracts to get out of purchasing grapes and using quality parameters and things like that really put pressure on the growers.
He says estimates show 400,000 tons of grapes went unharvested last year in California, and there are fresh fears this year could be even worse.
One of the real frustrating things for the growers in California is that our largest buyers and the top 7 wineries control about 70% of the U.S. wine market. And over the last 20 years, they've evolved into kind of what we call global alcohol companies. And so they're no longer just sourcing California grapes and just selling wine.
As imports increase, it's another challenge for California's grape growers who have no home for some of their grapes. And the prices they're being paid haven't gone up as much as costs to produce a ton of grapes.
We were being paid $2,000 to $2,500 a ton back in 1998. Maybe in current times, in 2023, 2024, for sparkling wine grapes, we're being paid $2,850 to $2,900. And that's really only a 10% increase over 20 years or more.
Thompson says at the same time, her costs are up anywhere from 30 to 50%. Still, the toil Thompson has dedicated to this land is 5 generations deep, and she hopes there's still a group of consumers that want a connection to the wine they drink.
I really do feel that there is a group out there that are millennials who are really getting into collecting wine, or they have that authentic need to connect. There's an opportunity in the industry, and I think that the smart wineries will capitalize on that. The question will be for us as family farmers, how long can we wait for them to discover this? And so I just would ask for people in the Midwest or wherever you might be across the United States, like, when we say get to know your farmer, we really mean, even in the wine industry, know who the farmer is behind those grapes and know who the winemaker is.
The biggest question from grape growers and those in the industry is, why aren't legislators stepping in? What's being called a dirty secret is the fact that 20 million gallons of imported bulk wine poured into California in just the first 5 months of the year, all while a large portion of California's grapes, as you just saw, don't have a home. Some argue that the government stepping in with tariffs on imported bulk wine would actually help save family farmers. Well, other big news on the trade front this week, the U.S. refusing to tighten trade ties with Vietnam. That's in Ag Around the World next.